right, buzz babies. We are here live at Planet Comicon. I got Phil Hester in the house. Phil, how you doing today? How's the show?
Good. How are you guys?
Dude, I'm doing great. I am so stoked to talk to you. Earlier I stopped by. I was looking. You got the pages from Gotham.
Oh, right, yeah.
Doing with Tom King, and it's such a cool, crazy. You're dealing with all these like noir tropes, but you guys are making it feel like fresh and exciting.
Yeah.
And then like the crime alley origin and stuff.
Right.
Like, what's it like working on this book? How you feeling about it?
It's really been an incredible experience. I feel like I learned a lot from Tom while I was working on it.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like how to structure a story and the kind of discipline it takes to build a mystery and to pay it off without fumbling the bag, more or less. And Tom's an expert at all that, and I felt like every page of this book was like a little mini masterclass in how to write comics.
Very cool.
And it also afforded me a chance to like try some experimental things with my own storytelling. And it all sort of fit in with the theme of the book, because the theme of the book is sort of like how past actions reverberate through time, positive and negative. And so for me, it was a chance to like see how I could like make visual motifs throughout the book reverberate. So like I'll repeat compositions from earlier in the story, later in the story. Even if I'm not totally replicating the actual panel, the composition will be the same because I want to sort of subconsciously harken back to that earlier moment. So it was a fun chance to try some high-minded stuff like that.
Very cool. You guys have been getting good reviews. I've been on the reviews. Issue 5 just came out. It's on DC Ultra too for people that are reading it through the digital app. And you see earlier you mentioned the 6 issues done, right? We're waiting for it to drop, and that's next month.
I don't know exactly when it's supposed to ship. I should know because that's the thing most cartoonists know, but I don't. I know we hit it's a little bit later than we wanted it to be, but it should ship, not late, just like not at its original shipping date.
Yeah.
So it'll be out soon.
Now I've heard Tom King's scripts. I heard he kind of keeps it loose and lets the artists do a lot of play, and so that it's like more of a collaborative effort. He kind of lets you guys shine.
Yeah.
Are you used to that, or is that like kind of different for you?
I work all sorts of different formats, and I find something to enjoy about all of them. So I've worked, as loose as like Marvel plot first style, and as tight as not quite as tight as Alan Moore. Nobody writes like Alan Moore except Alan Moore, but people that wanted to choose camera angles and choose what's in the background. So there's something to be gained from working in all those styles, I think. But I prefer like people like Tom or people like Jeff Lemire, who are like, I wouldn't say terse, but they don't waste words.
Okay.
So they tell you the information that needs to be in the shot and then trust you to sort of take it from there. And at least in Jeff's case, I think it's because he's an artist himself and he knows the essential information that needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there. And Tom, I think, has collaborated with so many great artists. I think over time he's learned that like if you slack on the reins a little bit, artists can give you stuff you didn't expect that's better than what you had pictured in the first place.
Nice.
But I don't want to speak for him. He might not feel that way. I don't know.
I mean, the only way we could tell is if you got me an interview with him. Maybe.
Oh, okay. I see what's going on here.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, it's I told you earlier I'm a big fan of your art. The heavy, sharp lines, the angular nature of your art. I'm not the best at talking about art.
Right.
I'm a writer, and I talk about writing, and I say, oh, the pictures are very pretty.
Yeah.
But you definitely have a style that is, it's a tone very unique to you, and a voice on the page where, when you see your work, whose work it is.
Yeah, sadly, yes, I do.
How did you find your kind of your artistic voice? Like, was that like a struggle for you, or did it?
No, I think I found it the way everybody does, which is by working. I think when I speak to young artists, a lot of them are hung up on like, oh, I don't have a style yet, or how do I control my style? And the style is not really completely in your control. A lot of it is not only is it your strengths, but it's also your weaknesses, and then sort of how you deal with those weaknesses, how you work around them. It sort of accretes around your drawing and becomes your style.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to tell people not to be too overly conscious about developing a style, just let it happen. And usually, like, it'll be an amalgamation of all the, disparate influences in your reading habit. So, like, the stuff you read is going to affect the way you draw.
Yeah. Okay.
And I really, early on in my career, Frank Miller's Daredevil came out when I was 13. And so I always knew I wanted to be a comic book artist. I knew I wanted to draw like Jack Kirby and John Byrne and Joe Staton and Bernie Wrights and all these people that were around in the 70s that appealed to me. And then when his Daredevil hit, I was like, oh, that's the kind of cartoonist I want to be. Somebody that was like storytelling focused and very high contrast. And he led me further down a path of like exploring other people that put storytelling first and composition first. And that led me to people like Toth and Bernie Kriegstein and Harvey Kurtzman. And that became the stuff that was like the red meat to me. Like, the drawing is fine. The drawing's fun. You don't become a comic book artist unless you like to draw. But to me, that was secondary to caring about storytelling. And that became the main thing to me. And that's where my style came from.
Now, you mentioned earlier that when you talk to younger artists, you have them kind of hone in on their weakness and how to manipulate that to better their craft.
Yeah.
What would you say your weakness is?
I have a hard time, and this hasn't been cured no matter how old I get. I think I'm gonna work through it, but I don't. Like, if I'm not engaged with something on an emotional level, it's hard for me to portray it.
Okay.
So, like, that means sometimes so the hardest scenes in a script are not always the hardest things to draw. Sometimes, like, very boring scenes or very pedestrian scenes in a script are the hardest things to work on. So for me, that means I need to sit with those scenes for a while and find a way into them and not just draw them as presented. Because if I do that, you're going to get a boring scene back, and I don't want to bore anybody. It doesn't mean every scene you draw has to be bombastic and expansive, but every scene you draw should be intriguing or authentic in some way. So for me, when I have to draw, like two characters sitting in a car talking, that's something I have to think about for a while until I can find an angle into that story that makes it appealing to me to draw. Because if it's not appealing to me to draw, it's not going to be appealing for somebody to look at.
Well, okay.
So I have to find a way to like get into a scene, even if it's not a scene that's easily gotten into. So that would be my weakness.
Now, I'm thinking about Family Tree that you and Jeff Lemire did together, which, was when it's solicited, it's kind of more horror, but it's almost more like apocalyptic sci-fi. But it's also it's got a big coming of age element.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that emotion. There's a lot of family element. There's tons of action and some explosive like body horror, metamorphosis, right? But there's also a lot of tenderness. There's a lot of love and there's a lot of care between the characters. I think you nailed it, man.
Thank you.
And a lot of those panels, like you feel it, like. When when the daughter turns into a tree.
Yeah, and as absurd as that sounds, it's like a moving scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't know how much credit I can take for that, but anytime you're reading a Jeff Lemire story, no matter what genre it's cloaked in, it's going to turn into a moving family drama.
Yeah, it's going to hit you in the feels.
Yeah. Like I was sort of like that. Like when I first got the scripts, he wrote it all at once.
Oh, wow.
So when I first got the scripts, by the time I hit issue 2, there was a character that was introduced at the beginning of issue 2, Darcy. I don't know if you remember him, but he was sort of the absent parent of the kids. He's introduced to the reader at the beginning of issue 2, and he dies in the middle of issue 2. And you already care.
Yeah.
Like by the time he dies, it's already a moving scene. And that blew me away. That's something like Jeff and a very few other writers are capable of. And I don't know what that magic is, but I hope I absorbed some of it from working on that book.
Wow. Speaking of
Planet Comicon.
Now, that story was wild. It, like I said, and even reading a solicit going into it, it took me for twists and turns and things that I just did not expect. When you got those scripts and you read it and you're gearing up to start drawing these issues, like, did you have to kind of take a step back and really think about how you're going to attack? Because there's so much craziness. Like I said, the body horror, the family aspect, and the physical emotion that you need to see between the characters. Like, were you worried, like, when you're reading these scripts?
Not really. I would say that, like, Jeff and I had a big run up to this book. Like, we planned to do it like in 2016, and we didn't get to it till what, 2019, 2020. So we had a long time to like sit with it and think about it. And Jeff wrote a couple of versions of it before he finally settled on it and said, "This is what we're doing." But no, I was prepared for, well, prepared is probably not the right word, but I was open to whatever came down the pike because I trusted Jeff's talent. Like, I was a fan of his as a reader before I collaborated with him.
Yeah.
So I knew what kind of stories he wrote, and I knew what kind of stories I'd probably get to work on. So I was just went in ready for anything, and I was not disappointed.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I again, like, I can't get enough of your work. I'm so excited for issue 6 of Gotham Year One, and like, I think you and Tom King are like a great match. Like, you and Jeff did great. I'm also a fan of your Green Arrow you did with Kevin Smith. You've gotten to work with some very influential people. I went to the Marvel Knights panel, and Jimmy Palmiotti was talking about how big a deal like Kevin Smith was, how Kevin Smith was one of the first like adult men to say, like, comic books are cool. And he said it on David Letterman. Right. So like, you've paired with some really awesome people. Is like, what's anybody that like or any property or big writer that you're kind of like jonesing for maybe one day?
Oh, I should never say that because I don't want to, exclude anybody by just forgetting about them and then to have them take, a slight. No, I find like I've been really blessed. Like, every writer I've worked with over the last 10 years has been really like incredible. If I look back on the last year, and it was all, it was Tom, it was Ram V, it was Bendis, it was Stephanie Phillips. It was like really amazing people that I worked with in the last year. I'm like, I don't know if I can go back to working with normal writers, and I include myself there. So, I've been really spoiled, and now that I've like been on the mountaintop, I don't know if I can go back.
Well, I would also say that you spoil the writers you're working with. You bring out a lot of great elements, and you all the properties you've worked on. Like, I think you all work together and make each other shine.
I appreciate that.
I just this has been so cool, man. Like I said, I'm a big fan of your art, and I think you're a super cool dude. And I was very excited to get to meet you, and I appreciate you taking.
No, it was fun to meet you. I'm glad you came by.